All right. Good morning. Welcome to the Ann Arbor Real Estate Investors Club Fundamental Fridays series. Today's session is Negotiation 101, which I put out in the description that negotiation, I think, it's part art, part science, and it's definitely a skill. And I think it is one of the least taught skills in the industry, but certainly very critical because it's really where the rubber meets the road. And I'll give you, an overview of how to best approach it, or how I have done it based on my experience. Just by way of reminder, the Ann Arbor Real Estate Investors Club, our purpose is learning, networking, and doing deals. And that's what we focus on, and that's what, all of our events are about. And that's what we do. I talk about the fundamentals. I emphasize the fundamentals because I think fundamentals are important in any industry, in any profession. And I like starting off with this quote from Michael Jordan, get the fundamentals down and the level of everything you do will rise. So I typically start off my sessions with that. So, as you have been following along with us the past several weeks, um, I do a sequence of classes on the fundamentals, and this is class number 5 in my rotation and in my sequence of events. And some of them are, build off the previous ones. I do my best to make them self-contained for those who can't completely follow the 12 sessions in sequence. So this is where we are. I just scheduled a couple other events coming up for the contracts and due diligence and other sessions on down the road. So stay tuned for that. All right, today's objectives are, I try and make things simple, not overwhelming, but not too simple, because I have to cover the territory of the important points. So I've kind of boiled real estate down to 5 main points of negotiation of a deal. How to craft a strategy ahead of time before you get into the negotiations. Um, I have these 5 other rules of negotiation that have kind of cropped up during deals over the years and kind of, a number of times. So I've kind of clumped them together into 5 ancillary rules to keep in mind as you go through a negotiation. Some additional, I call it additional cards to play, or additional, creative type of negotiating. I've got some really good resources, and as time allows, I'll talk about a case study or two of deals that I'm currently involved with. And every time I do this class, I'm mostly involved in a negotiation or 2 or 3 that are ongoing, and I can kind of give you a little bit of a window into that as well. So this is today's objectives. So I invite you to grab a pen and paper. I do have a cheat sheet that I'll give you at the back end that covers this as well. But today is really basic and really fundamental. Um, and there's a lot more to each of these items that I talk about. But again, I want to give you the 10,000-foot overview. So when you see contracts, which I will do contracts next week, I'll do a session on contracts. these are the major elements of a real estate contract. Um, I think the real estate contract that we use has 40 some paragraphs. But these are the most important ones, that every deal boils down to. There's a lot, and I'll get more into it a little bit next week, but price, terms, dates, inclusions, exclusions, and contingencies. So the big two out of the five are the price and terms. And any experienced or savvy real estate investors say, well, let's get the first two agreed on and settled and get that, off to the side. Then we can work on these other three are kind of ancillary and not as critical to the deal. And you certainly don't want to talk about dates, inclusions, exclusions, contingencies, and then anything else unless you've got price and terms agreed on. So price and terms are those are the bread and butter. And once you have those, meeting of the minds on the price and terms, these other elements are very important and they play roles in negotiating. And they might even play a role in adjusting the price and the terms, but just know that price and terms, that's what a seller wants to know, that's what a buyer wants to know, and all the rest of the stuff we say, we can work that out. So these are the five main negotiating points. And it's not rocket science. It's very simple. As you've heard me say before, simple is not always easy. So these are the 5 points of negotiation. Um, Create your negotiating strategy is step two. So you've found the deals based on the classes we took. You have analyzed the deals, okay? And remember, in the, going through the checkbox of your analysis formula, when you come, you know, after you make all the calculations, um, based on the income and expenses and projected income and costs and all that stuff, you end up with, a little bit of a window of what you are able to offer based on your business model. You don't let the deal dictate what you're willing to offer. You let your business plan dictate these numbers, the initial offer and the MAO, which is the maximum allowable offer. So I know in real estate investing, buyers and sellers often want to get to, I don't want to screw around with initial offers and back and forth. What's your bottom line? What are you willing to take? What is your top line offer? Though all those elements come into play, but those come into play based on a number of external factors that usually have to do with the personalities of the buyers and sellers. But traditionally and historically, and it plays out every day, is that under any circumstance really of a deal, buyers and sellers expect there to be a negotiation. Sellers don't expect, they shouldn't expect, I won't say they don't, but they should learn not to expect that they're going to get their asking price just because it's their asking price. Okay. Every buyer is going to want to negotiate off that asking price because psychologically they think, well, yeah, that's what the seller wants. And the seller says, yeah, if I get this, I'm happy. That's my wish number for the seller, is the asking price. Okay. And the same on the other end, you know, for the buyer. The buyer has his or her number, the wish number, which, I just got a text on one of these deals I'm working on now, where, the asking price. Buyer comes back. He says, Brian, I thank you for sending it to me, but I'm not going to look at it unless the price is at least 30% lower than what you just sent me. So that's the buyer's number based on his formula and his plan. So my point on this slide is, remember your analysis formula, which is based on your individual plan that you've created. Okay, so don't forget that. And don't, when you're looking at the next deal that comes across your transom, you want to keep the discipline of looking at it through the lens of your business plan, not what the deal is, and not trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Now, you might look at the deal and there might be opportunity there for it to be more of a round peg in a round hole, but that's where the negotiation comes in. But for simplicity's sake, and for today's session's sake, you've got your numbers, you have run your numbers, as it's called, and you've done your analysis, and now you've got your bottom line, which is your maximum allowable offer. And you're not going to offer that out of the gate, because again, the seller's going to know that what you're going to offer is your wish number. Okay, like he has his wish number, which is his asking price. You're going to have your wish number, which is your initial offer. Okay, that's your wish number. Yeah, I wish I could get it at this. And but everybody knows you don't have to, but everyone expects a negotiation. Let me just leave it that way. Sometimes a seller, again, depends on his or her motivation, depends on terms of the offer. If it's like we talked about last week, if it's a cash offer, that comes into play. But if it's a cash offer, if it's low, if a seller is highly motivated, the seller might take that initial offer. You never know. Every situation is different, because every buyer and seller is different and have different motivations. So that's part of the negotiating, is trying to get yourself in the shoes of the other party. But that happens. But anyway, so that's our starting point. Our starting point is the list price, which is the wish number of the seller, and the initial offer, which is the wish number of the buyer. And then I really love this strategy, and I try and use it all the time, certainly for myself, but I try and stress the value of it to especially my investor clients, but to all clients. And that is to, not get emotionally attached to a deal, whether it's a personal residence, or an investment property. Investment property, you certainly should not have an emotional investment in it. That's not to say that people don't, but that's kind of the ideal. And that's why, I've learned it. It's called the wish, want, and walk strategy, where, you enter into the negotiation, kind of like you're entering into, a chess game or something. And you have your strategy going in, you have your numbers, and the bookends of what you're going to do as an investor business person. All right, that's the wish, the want, and the walk. So if you're entering into a deal, like this deal, So where it doesn't sound like he's very strongly interested in the deal anyway, but he wouldn't look at it unless the price is at least 30% below what it is. So, I mean, I just got this text about 10 minutes ago, so I could go back to him and say, well, are you willing to write an offer at 30% below the asking price? And then that's the next hurdle. Um, are you willing to do that or not? Well, then he's he's either motivated or not that motivated. He says, well, maybe, but now that I think of it, I'm still not, it still doesn't really float my boat. So I'm not that strongly interested in it. So again, that happens. And that's all part of the negotiation. Um, and I'll talk about the 30% in one of the rules in the next slide. But I like you to have the mindset or adopt the mindset when you enter into these negotiations, the wish, want, and walk numbers, and having those in mind. And my wish number is, yeah, wow, if I could buy this property at this price, that would be great. I would buy deals like this all day long and twice on Sunday. That's your wish. You want to make it realistic, which again, a lot of novice investors don't do. They don't make it realistic. So it really becomes a waste of time. But I want you to think of it as a business person. Think of it as, yeah, this would, if I could get this deal at this price, this would be a great deal. I would be very happy, and I would be more than happy to, rinse and repeat and do the same thing. And then, you sit with pen to paper and flesh it out and go, play out the scenarios. Well, what if I don't get it at X dollars? What if I can get it at Y dollars? And that I'm doing with another deal I'm working on where my client says, yeah, Brian, I've got to have this number. I would love to get this number. I've got to get that number. If I get some number in between, I'm still pretty good and I'm happy. So that's the want number, and that's the mindset you need to develop on these deals. Is, yeah, what's my wish number? What's my want number, which obviously is typically somewhere in the middle, and what is my walk away number? I've used the example of a guy in the group who does flips. The more this particular investor, the more flips he has done, you would normally think the more he wants to do if he makes profit on them. But his experience has been there have been a lot of headaches and problems and unforeseen problems. And yeah, at the end of the day, he still made a profit, but the aggravation factor for him has kind of ticked up over time. So where he said, 5 years ago, he would say, well, I'm not going to look at a flip unless I can walk away with a 30,000 in my pocket. If it's 29,000, I'm not interested. 30 is my walk number. Now over time, now he says, yeah, Brian, I've done X number of flips, and yeah, I've made money, but the aggravation is so much that my walk number is now 50,000. Okay. And so that's him, and that's his model. That's his buy box. He does it. He's very successful at it. Does he do fewer deals with that formula? Yes. But again, that's his model, and he's happy with it, and he keeps the self-discipline of adhering to it. That he says, oh well, I'm kind of tempted. I don't let myself get tempted. If I can make 40,000 on this deal, oh, gee, should I or shouldn't I? No, I stick to my guns, and that's it. 50 is my bottom, and I'm out at 40. Now, Any other investor might say, well, you're crazy. You're leaving 40,000 on the table. Well, he may be, but again, that's his model. And you know, let him do what he wants to do and you do what you want to do. Don't worry about what he does or he doesn't do. Does that deal fit with your model? That's the other thing about about this whole business, but negotiating in particular is, kind of whataboutism and what's the, your what's somebody else going to do, especially if you're in a negotiation on a deal where there are multiple offers or other players in the mix. You're going to start second guessing yourself. If somebody else wants this deal and they want it badly and you're competing for the deal, then your natural tendency is to let your self-doubt creep in and say, well, wait a second, this guy must know more than I know, if he wants it this badly and is willing to pay this much more. Therefore, I better throw my strategy out the window and make my bid higher because I think this other guy knows more than I know. That's kind of probably one of the hardest things to do in this business, um, is you know having obtaining and keeping your personal discipline, um, in place, um, because because I hear it happen all the time. Oh, oh yeah. I go, what'd you buy that deal for? That's not your buy box. Oh well, whatever reason, there were a bunch of bids on it, and I thought, well, maybe I missed something, and so I bought it, and now I regret it. Happens very, very often. I don't want you to do that. And I don't, and again, it's probably one of the hardest things to do. Then you would have FOMO, fear of missing out. If you're in a multiple offer situation, you don't get the deal. Oh, that guy's going to make a fortune, and I missed out. So the next time, I'm not going to let that happen. It's really the importance of setting your own discipline, your own parameters, and keeping your discipline. It's, again, very much easier said than actually done in practice, but that's what classes are for, to teach things the way they really should be. And the more you can keep to your discipline, I think the better off you'll be in the long term. That's kind of the gist of it there. Multiple offers, but keep in mind, that's why I love the strategy. It's WWW. You can always revert back to it as you're in the throes, and up to your elbows in the negotiation, and everybody's saying you got to respond instantly, and all the feeding frenzy of these deals, which I mean, it happens all the time. To ground yourself with, you say, time out, Brian. Say it to yourself. What's my wish? What's my want? What's my walk? Because you set that going in, you set that up front. You're not doing that on the fly, because there's too many other distractions and too many opportunities to get you off the track. And the other benefit of it, aside from the main benefit, which is for you sticking to your plan that's going to be successful, is that when you are an investor who is decisive and able to make decisions quickly, that you develop a good reputation as an investor, which in turn attracts more deals to you. Okay. I am just one example. I'm one realtor out of a million. Um, and I run this group, so I talk to a lot of people. I've been in the business 20 years. I know a lot of people, but I know, which I can really count on one, maybe two hands, the investors who are going to be at the top of my call list when I get it, when I get an opportunity that comes my way, because I know they have the ability to analyze the deal quickly. I usually know what their parameters are. I don't always know how many, how many pots they've got cooking on the stove at any given time or at the time I have the deal. But I have a very short list of investors I'm going to call based on deals for that reason. So that's the secondary benefit of adopting this strategy and utilizing this strategy and communicating it is, not only does it work for you to build your business and build your portfolio, but it builds the opportunity to get deals to come to you that you don't have to go out and look for. Hope that makes sense. Here's these other these other rules, which is number one is just a repeat of what I told you in the previous slide with a different twist on it. It's a these are kind of all mantras that I've developed over time that get worked into my mind that I can remember because they're brief and they're powerful. Number one is the numbers don't lie. That's the thing about real estate investing versus purchasing real estate for your own personal residence. It's your own personal residence. There's a lot of intangible factors involved in what you're paying and what you're willing to pay and why and all that stuff. Real estate investing, it's about the numbers. And again, the average investor doesn't understand that not that profitable deals are hard to find. Okay, that they are out there and they are everywhere, but you have to find them. They're not going to plop into your lap because a lot of people want to invest in real estate. So there's a lot of competition. And so you have to keep remembering that the numbers don't lie. And again, this is the idea of, well, I haven't done a deal in a long time, or I've lost out on a bunch of deals and other multiple offers. Therefore, you have a tendency to get emotional, get a little bit more anxious to do a deal. And, there are, again, novice investors that want so badly to do a deal that they'll do a deal that they will regret sooner or later. Happens all the time. But if you remember that, again, the numbers don't lie. The numbers are the numbers and the numbers don't lie. The numbers, they can't make a square peg go into a round hole. No matter how many ways you slice it or how you try and wedge it in there. So it's the same advice is stick to your plans, stick to your guns, stick to your strategy. All right, the 20% rule. This I've learned over time. And it's really kind of a general rule. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a pretty strong one. But especially in real estate investing, okay, this is what I want to import to you and make sure you realize the importance of it. That the idea that if you are going to offer more than 20% below the asking price, you need to have a valid reason. You need to have a valid reason. You need to have a provable reason. As a smart business person, again, it happens all the time. I tell the story of an investor who's an agent in town, and I'll put a listing on the market, and he'll call me up and you go, Brian, I'm making an offer right now, cash offer, 50 cents on the dollar. He's done it for years. And I tell him every time, please don't waste my time. And there are investors that'll do that. And there are investors that'll get deals that way, you know. But it's a waste of time. It's an insult because I know he hasn't based it on any formula other than he wants to take advantage of the seller. And so the rule is if you offer less than 20% below the asking price, you're risking insulting the seller or making the seller feel insulted. If the seller's an experienced investor, he or she likely won't be insulted. If he or she is an individual buyer or a buyer, you know, or an individual seller, excuse me, um, a seller that doesn't sell real estate very often, they're going to be insulted, and then that's going to build a wall that you'll never get through. You say, "Oh, I didn't mean it. Now I want this." You've blown your credibility. But if because there are sellers out there that put asking prices out there that are unrealistic and that don't make sense, but agents put it out there because they say, well, you know, at least we're getting it out in the market and perhaps we can attract offers. And once the market tells my seller how ridiculous that number is, then perhaps the seller will realize, okay, well, maybe I was wrong and maybe I have to make an adjustment. That's the biggest thing in this market. I have a couple associates of mine who uh, have deals that fit that category to a T. There are investment properties, they put them on the market, nothing has happened, no offers, no showings, no nothing for weeks and weeks and weeks. Well, what does that tell you? It tells you it's overpriced. I don't need a real live person to tell me that. But we say the market has spoken. Um, but then, you know, so that's the circumstance where you can offer below 2020 because it doesn't make sense. But once again, if you're going to offer below 20, have a reason. All right. If you're an investor, you're a buyer looking at these as an investor. Okay. You need to make a profit. Nobody is going to begrudge you making a profit. But what they're going to begrudge you is if they feel that you are trying to take advantage of them to make a profit. Okay. So these are, yeah, not only these, so these are, there's three, four, there's six deals that I've been involved with in recently to varying degrees where this is the circumstance. The seller thinks the properties are worth way more than they're actually worth. Okay. But they're not going to listen until they have a sequence of buyers who are going to, you know, either verbally or make written offers at the low numbers. And then the seller will decide yes or no anyway. And then and then again, it still always circles back to, well, what's the motivation of the seller? How badly do they need the money for this deal or whatever their personal circumstance is? So the moral of the story for today, this 20% rule, is that when you're looking at deals and when you're thinking of buying deals and your numbers tell you that, you know, look, it's not going to be anywhere near asking, but I am willing to go ahead if I can get it at this price, and this is why, it's going to cost me $60,000 to renovate. You know, the rental market is this. It's going to, you know, the taxes are going to be this after I buy it. And you try and build a case for the seller or the seller's agent, which is point number 3 on the slide here, that agent can go back to the seller and build a case why the property, okay, why the buyer is willing to pay that. Again, it goes back to, again, novice sellers who say, well, my property is worth this because Zillow says it's this, or because I think it's this, or because my neighbor told me this, or because this one down the street sold for this. No, your property is not worth it for those reasons. Your property is worth what a buyer is willing to pay for it. That's it. That's kind of a, an earth-shattering concept for these sellers. They say, oh no, Zillow says it's worth this, so my property's worth this. What Zillow says, or what Redfin says, or whatever any of these say. Well, no, it's not. Is there a buyer who will buy it at that price? No. So it's not worth it. It's only worth what a buyer's willing to pay for it. If you're in line, if you're the buyer and you're telling him, well, I'm willing to go through with this deal, but it's 40% below what you're asking, or 50% or whatever. Okay. Do we have a conversation or do we not have a conversation? And then, people can get all upset about it or insulted or this and that. Go back to rule number one. The numbers don't lie. These are my numbers. I'm interested in the deal at this price. If you're not interested, then let's part ways and get on with our lives. All right. Um, Intermediaries, agents. Um, that means there's four people in the transaction, not two. They're buyer and seller, two people in the transaction. Buyer's agent, seller's agent uh, are the two. Are the additional two. That makes four people involved in the transaction. Four different personalities, four different sets of motivation, four different levels of experience, a lot of variables among those four. I don't have time to go into those details today. I'll do it a little bit more when I talk about compensation agreements in a session down the road. But the basic idea that I try and emphasize um, is trying to put yourself in the shoes of the other party. If you're working with an agent as a buyer or the seller, to make sure that your agent tries to get into the shoes of the other party, um, to make the deal work and to create a win-win-win situation. And a win-win-win means sellers win, buyers win, and agents win, but everyone is happy with the results of the deal that they would do. They're so happy that they would do another deal together. That's what you want to create. That doesn't always happen, again, because during the course of negotiations or the course of the process of the transaction, somebody gets ticked off about something, and it's usually they're ticked off because they think that the other party is trying to take advantage of them. That's the essence of it, what it all boils down to. But when you're trying to gain empathy and when you're working with these intermediaries, this is a mantra you want to circle back to when things get heated or whatever, or you're far apart. You can say, hey, time out, wait a second. What are we here for? Do we have a seller who wants to sell? Yes. Do we have a buyer who wants to buy? Yes. Okay, now let's roll up our sleeves and work out the details and create this win-win-win situation. So let's everybody take a breath, okay? And let's remember we got a seller who wants to sell, a buyer who wants to buy. Let's massage and work through the details. So these are the rules. So the numbers don't lie. 20% rule. Empathy. Make sure you have a good negotiating agent, because nine out of the 10 deals you do in your career, there will be an intermediary, whether it's a realtor or a wholesaler or whatever. Um, I'm big on empathy, and I'm big on doing my best to create a win-win-win. Doesn't always happen, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But that's what you're shooting for. Anyway, all right. Those are the 5 rules. I hope I made my point. Those are the key things. Additional factors are back and forth. These are rules that maybe other negotiation classes will teach you or tell you or whatnot. Uh, these are like cards you can play in a card game if you want to do it that way. I'm personally like to get more directly to the bottom line without playing unnecessary games. Um, but the typical negotiation is, some variation on splitting the difference um, for oversimplification purposes. Um, that's a deal I'm involved with now, and we could have strategized. Okay, well here we put the property on the market at 359. Property was sitting on the market for a little bit while. We get an offer of 340. Okay. So my client says, well, here's my bottom line, Brian. I'll take your advice of however we want to get there. This is what I got to walk away with. Now what do we do? Um, so in this particular circumstance, I'm like, well, we could go back and do a back and forth and do a little tennis match until we ultimately meet in the middle somewhere. But again, this depends on it depends on the seller, it depends on the buyer, it depends on seller's agent, who was me, and the buyer's agent, who is an experienced realtor who doesn't want to play games. Um, I didn't know her before getting involved with her with this transaction, but I learned to read people pretty quickly. Um, so I can say, oh, well, all right, well, we can counter, we're 20,000 apart, just for simplification purposes. We're 20,000 apart. Um, now I can come back, we can come back, splitting it right down the middle is kind of, you're playing chess and you're kind of thinking, well, the buyer has made their initial offer, which is their wish offer, which if they got it at 340, they'd be happy, but they're really expecting a counter offer, maybe in the middle. And so I'm thinking that the buyer's thinking, uh, I'm going to offer 340, but I'd be happy to get it at 350. Okay, so I'm doing some mind reading. I'm right or wrong. You're usually wrong, but you never know. But that's the logic in the transaction. And same way. So I could have said, well, all right, I think that the buyer's expecting and would be happy at 350. We can come back at 355 and then have the buyer come back at 345, and then we meet at 350 and we're in the middle and kind of everyone's happy. Or I can say right now, I can call the other agent. I can say, Haley, we don't want to screw around. We want to get this done. Can we just meet in the middle and get it done without another back and forth? Let me get back to you. Boom, done. We met right in the middle out of the gate. And so that's fine, and that's everybody's happy right now. And so today the inspection is going on in about an hour. So after the inspection, there might be more negotiating, I'll talk about that a little bit next week. But for where we are right now, that's where we are. So anything can happen at the inspection. Um, and so we'll see. That's another gray area that now we might need to renegotiate that 350 for whatever reason or not. We don't know until the jury, the inspector, the inspection report comes back, um, and the buyers decide what if anything they want to ask for. Um, so that's it. There's other schools of thought that say, stick to your guns, and I say that to a degree. You can negotiate within I mean, you can do whatever you want to do, but negotiate within your window of your wish and your walk. Negotiate within that window, not outside that window. Okay. You say, no, that's my bottom line. That's my walk away number. Be creative. That kind of gets into things like financing or appliances, or if there's a snowblower or a lawnmower, or if somebody wants to unload a car or whatever. That's that kind of stuff. There's the other approach where people will say, well, if I'm negotiating, I'm never going to give anything up. I'm never going to just agree to something the other side asks for unless I get something. Whether I want that something or not, I have to get something. So people use that as a strategy. I don't, but people do. And then the idea of, which I'm involved in one like this right now, the first one to speak loses. And this is what happens with off-market properties often is, a seller has a price in mind, but the seller is not necessarily going to name the price. And you talk to a seller, yeah, Mr. Seller, are you interested in selling your property? I'd be interested in buying it if we can come to an agreement on price. Okay, yeah, okay, Brian, I would entertain an offer. And then I would say, well, Mr. Seller, what are you looking for? What are you asking? And then if it's an investor who this is not his first rodeo, he's going to say, well, what are you going to offer me, Brian? Okay. And again, we all know, because we all do these type of negotiations all the time anyway, not necessarily real estate. If I'm a buyer, I might throw out a number where he might say to himself, oh shit, I never expected I'd get that signed. Let's go, And likewise, if the seller's the first one to throw out the number, I'm the buyer, I might say, holy crap, I was willing to pay a lot. I'm talking to my little guy in my head. I was willing to pay a lot more than that. So this is a valid one. This is a valid thing to keep in mind, that the first one that throws out the number loses. And I mean, they don't, but it's a little earworm that you should have, that you should try and be the one that has the other person make the initial, whether it's a offer on the buy side or what they want to get it on the sell side. These are all really good things that I've honed over 20 years. Anyway, I'm going to get the train into the station. Um, I'm reading a book. I'm reading another book. It's called Stolen Focus. It's about how the internet sucks all of our knowledge and our reading and our ability to focus, because there's just the volume of information that we attempt to consume every day. So I really have to teach this to myself, to really stop, take a time out, put the phone down, stop scrolling, and get back into reading, paper books and trying to consume them, and not get the Chat GPT summary of it, not get the audiobook version of it, to really read them. These are 3 books I'm going to suggest that you add to your list. I've read them. Um, 2 of the 3 I've reread a couple times. I encourage you to put these on into your Amazon wish list, and put them on your Prime, and read them, because there's lots and lots of valuable stuff in all of these. The third one I put on there because it really all boils down to trust. And if you're building a real estate investing career that you want to generate a lot of income off of over a long period of time, your trustworthiness is your biggest asset and will be your biggest contributing factor towards your success. If people trust you, um, and it takes a long time to build trust and a short amount of time to trash your trust. But so I don't need to go into that. That's it. Here's upcoming events. A couple of them I put on Meetup, but I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 in the queue for the month of February. Yeah, so very busy, and this is all good stuff because all of this stuff you're going to do sooner or later, and I'm here to teach it to you sooner. Um, Benefits of the membership, you guys have that already, so I'm not going to go through with that. Um, if you're going to join, talk to me offline about it, and we'll go from there. So I appreciate it. Sorry, I did take a little bit longer, which you kind of